My name is Pastor Josh.
And I'm Pastor Larry.
And we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more in just a moment, but we're going to be taking some time to talk about carrying your senior pastor's vision. And for many of you here, you might be staff members at your church, you might be lay people at your church. We have had the great privilege of serving here at Eastridge, both for a long time, but also alongside of Pastor Steve for a long time. And I'll tell you, it's not an easy thing to be a unified staff in a unified church. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of communication. It takes a lot of trust, but it is so worth it. And so, Pastor Larry, why don't we introduce ourselves a little bit?
Okay.
And just so you know, we have a very informal relationship, and so our conversation today will probably be fairly informal, and we'll end with some Q&A, which the Q&A will probably be the most beneficial part of everything we do today. So,
no PowerPoints for us today. We're going to... Yes, I'm Larry Murrell, and I serve as executive pastor here at Eastridge Church. I oversee ministry development, so mentoring the pastors and their ministries, ministry directors. I also involved in missions and a few other things. But so a little bit of my background, so you kind of know the perspective that I'll bring today, is that I spent the first 14 years as a youth and associate pastor, and then the next 16 years as a lead pastor, and now the last 10 as an executive pastor. So I've been on both the second chair and lead chair positions, and my perspective now is way different than when it started, okay? So, but that's a little bit of my perspective and my background. It's great to be with you today.
Yeah.
Pastor Josh.
That's going to be such a valuable perspective, to be able to hear not only from someone who has served
who's old.
on
Go ahead. You were going to say it.
Hey, I turned 40 this summer, so we're good. Someone who's both been on a staff and then been the lead person who led the staff. There's different pressures, and for us to be able to understand some of the pressures that our lead pastors face and how we can come alongside of them is super important. So I've been on staff here at Eastridge Church now 16 years.
Ooh, come on.
I was raised here as a high school student. My parents came here to Eastridge in '99. It was in between my freshman and sophomore year of high school. So I finished high school here on the plateau, then went to Northwest University, and I interned here at Eastridge while I was in college with Pastor Tyler Soley. He was my small group leader when I was in high school, so I am who I am today. But came on staff to be Tyler's right-hand guy, and I was the junior high youth pastor here at Eastridge. If you would have told me in college I was going to work with junior hires, I would have quit on the spot. No way, no chance, no how. And just in 2 months of doing youth ministry, fell in love with junior hires. And I'd still believe that junior high is one of the most undersold and important areas of ministry for the whole church. Now been in youth ministry for 16 years. And so served in a variety of capacities. Really, my job portfolio is do whatever Pastor Larry and Pastor Steve tell me to do. And so that requires a lot of different things, but it's a joy every day that we get to show up here and do what we do. So we both bring some unique perspective, and we've learned how to work alongside of Pastor Steve,
yes,
which is both incredible and challenging, because when you have a strong leader, it requires you to be flexible. And I think that today's conversation is super important, and here's why. Because God has a vision for his church.
Amen.
And he doesn't have multiple visions for his church. He has a vision for his church. And he puts a leader to oversee and to be a caretaker and a shepherd over each individual church. And our role as staff members and lay people is to come alongside of that leader, to support them, to carry their vision, and to make sure that we are taking their vision into our departments, into our area of ministry, into our areas of responsibility. And that is not an easy task. And so what we would like to do is kind of give you 3 things we've identified as some hurdles, some things that kind of become obstacles when it comes to carrying your lead pastor's vision. And then I'm sure we'll fill in some blanks, and I'm sure the Q&A will be helpful and beneficial for you too. So in true ministry form, they all start with the same letter. So,
yes, we went to Northwest.
I'll give you the first one, and we'll kind of talk back and forth about it a little bit. But one of the first hurdles that you're going to run into when it comes to carrying your senior pastor's vision is a lack of clarity. Is a lack of clarity. We've been fortunate enough to work for a senior pastor who has no shortage of clarity. You know, everything is clearly defined. He talks about it all the time. He shares it with us all the time. But I know from many people that I talk to, one of the biggest frustrations we have is that vision is not clearly defined. And so a lot of times there's a place of frustration. There's a place where you feel like, man, I feel like I have vision for my area, my department, my area of ministry, but I just don't feel like I'm getting a lot from the top. And so I would really encourage you, if you feel like there is a lack of clarity when it comes to the vision of the house or the vision of the leader that you serve under, it's important that you ask the right kind of questions. So how you approach asking questions is massive. One thing I would tell you to avoid is please don't ask questions that put your leader on the defensive. Nope. What you need to be doing is asking questions to go, hey, it's really my heart to see, like, let's take youth ministry, for example, since that's the world I've been in for the last 16 years. To be able to say, hey, Pastor Steve, it's my heart for youth ministry here at East Ridge Church to just hit the target for what you have in your heart. So can you help me? Can you help me define what success in youth ministry looks like here at East Ridge? What are the things that would just elate you if you were to see lived out within the life of our youth ministry that would be in alignment with the vision and the culture of what you have in your heart? And can I tell you what you've just done is you've given your leader permission not only to guide you, but you've given your leader the permission to open their heart and clarify for you, this is what I see. Yeah. This is what I want to see lived out. So instead of you coming to them saying, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to make it happen, you reverse the conversation and go, tell me what you see. Tell me what success looks like for you. And that way you set your leader up to be able to have honest conversation with you without putting them on the defensive.
That's good. That's good. Before I was a lead pastor, I was trying to think through how I would describe this. In fact, I was a little disappointed in your bio. It says that you have passion for all these different things, and you didn't list golf.
Well, yeah, that's an old bio.
Oh, okay, all right.
I read it too, and I was like, man, I need to update this.
I thought maybe it wasn't a passion, but it's an addiction now. So it's I'm going to use a couple of illustrations here, one from golf and one from football. And before I was a lead pastor, I kind of looked at this whole vision thing and vision casting thing and even vision carrying thing like golf. And that I was in the gallery watching the lead pastor, and if he clarified vision, I was clapping, yeah. If he didn't, I was like, what's going on, right? In that situation, I think, man, this guy needs more vision, he needs to be, and I felt like it was all his responsibility to cast and carry the vision. Yeah. Until I became a lead pastor. And then I realized I do have ultimate responsibility for that. But the lead pastor is not the only vision caster, and the lead pastor is not the only vision carrier.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody, to one degree or another, whether you're on staff or not, is to help cast that vision. So we need the clarity, right? We need to understand that. And Josh touched on something very good there, and that's where I say it's more like football, that the lead pastor is either the coach, but I even like to think of them as the quarterback, because they're in the game too. And we're huddling, we're getting close, we're finding out the game plan, we're hearing the clarity, we're getting the vision of what we're wanting to do, and then we go out and carry that out. And that's what we need to look at it more of, is that it's not a solo sport. Vision casting is a team sport, right? It's a team sport. We all have a responsibility. In fact, the matter is, if you think it's only the lead pastor's job, you're wrong, and also you're carrying out a vision. It may not be his, probably is not, or hers, but no matter what you're doing, you're carrying out a vision. Yeah. How you interact with people out in the lobbies, how you are carrying out your ministry, you're communicating a vision all the time. So we better make sure it lines up with our lead, right? Yeah. And so I would just encourage you with that. It is a team sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, golf is an addiction for sure.
Yes,
not even a question. As we were even talking about this subject, one of the things that I've had to learn how to tiptoe around is the reality that my lead pastor is also my dad. And having to learn where those spaces are where we're having father-son conversations. Because I talk to my dad different than I talk to my senior pastor. You know what I'm talking about? But there are definite moments where all of us can relate to this, where you have a moment of frustration or a moment of question, and if it's in the wrong setting or the wrong time, it actually becomes dishonoring to your leader. And so I would really encourage you to be mindful and understand that there are going to be moments where you need clarifying conversations. But where you have that conversation and who you have that conversation in front of and how you approach that conversation will either be something that supports your lead pastor, really empowers and enables them to be able to trust you and walk and be able to communicate to you well in that moment, or it will dishonor them. And it will put them on the defensive, and it will shut down any chance you had of having a productive conversation around clarity, because maybe it's in the middle of a staff meeting and it's in front of other staff members, and you called them out by asking the question the way that you did, and it put them in a spot where you dishonored them publicly. I'll tell you this, there are some conversations that are meant to be in private, and you can have open, honest dialogue behind closed doors. And here's our understanding here that's been so helpful, is we have permission to challenge and ask questions behind closed doors, and there will be honest dialogue with the understanding that when we walk out of this conversation, we will walk out of this room with unity, and I will defend whatever decision my lead pastor makes behind closed doors. I will defend it as if it were my own decision. Why? Because privately, we were able to have honest dialogue, and he heard me out, and I was able to express what I need to express. But at the end of that conversation, whatever decision he made, that's the call, and we're gonna roll with it.
That's good.
So be mindful of how and when and where you have those conversations. Lack of clarity. That's a big one.
That was number one.
That's a big one. Number two, we have lack of connection. Lack of connection. And I'll hit the side of departments, and then you can kind of talk about relationship a little bit. But where I see a big drop when it comes to carrying your lead pastor's vision is a lack of connection between the vision for the church and how that vision works in your department. A lot of times what we get is we have a picture in our heart of what we want to see happen in our department. And I'll just be honest with you. You don't get to have your own vision for your department. That may sound awkward, but here's the truth. You first exist. Your job, your role, the whole reason you are there is to support and serve the vision of the house. And the moment you create your own vision for your department, you now have division. And a house divided can't stand. So what happens if a church has a vision and you have your own vision for your department and they're not cohesive and congruent? Which wins? Well, in your heart of hearts, the truth is you're going to choose your own vision more than you're going to choose the vision of the house. And so here's one of the biggest keys is we have to learn a posture of humility and submission to the vision of the house. And you have to do it publicly as much as you got to coach yourself through it privately. And there are some things publicly that you got to do first before your heart's even ready to get there, right? Sometimes what you do publicly leads your heart. So like, for example, when Tyler and I took over in youth ministry, and listen, this is descriptive, this is not prescriptive. So this is not the only way to do it, this is just what we did. When we took over in youth ministry, our youth ministry had its own name. It was Impact Student Ministries. No association with the church. We had our own vision statements. We had our own cultural values. And I'll be honest, they were really good. They were really good, I mean, we wrote them down. They were in booklet form. We gave them to other youth ministries. Other people use this for their templates, right? But there came a moment where we had to make a decision. We're not going to be our own entity. We're not going to be a silo to ourselves. The church does not exist to serve us. We exist to serve the church. So we weren't Impact Student Ministries anymore. We were Eastridge Youth. Because the vision of our youth ministry was coming underneath the vision, the name, the association, the title, everything with the house. Even recently, we had our own youth vision statement, our own core values. Our church just went through a whole reorg with this, and I just said, hey, it doesn't make any sense for me for us to have our own vision statement. The vision of Eastridge Youth is the vision of Eastridge Church. Yeah. And so that is going to be our vision statement. The 4 pathways, our 4 core values of wanting everyone to discover Jesus, grow in community, find your purpose, change the world. Those are the 4 pathways we've laid out for our students. And the more you do that, guess what? You actually build a healthier church when you bring your department into alignment with the vision of the house. And so you have to be, your job as the leader is to be the bridge builder between the vision of the church and how it's going to contextualize within your department. And so just make sure that you're not running your own thing over here, but you bring everything underneath the vision in the heart of the house.
Excellent. And he's good, right? Really good. One of the things I want to go back to just knowing the right time to ask the questions.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's not before an important putt on the golf course. I'll just tell you that. It's not a good time to ask the question.
Unless you're wanting to win.
Oh, that's true.
When
That's
I
true.
ask Pastor Steve lots of questions. Is when he's about to hit a big shot. I go, hey, tell me about this.
Yes, exactly. No. Part of my role here at Eastridge is to make sure there's that connection between all the departmental ministries and Pastor Steve. And I'm kind of that connection piece. And so a lot of the one-on-ones we'll be asking questions. Okay, well, how does that line up?
Yeah.
How does that line up with what Pastor Steve's wanting? And there may be questions coming to me as well. It's like, I mean, what is he really looking for here? And so, but I want to say, you don't have to have the title of executive pastor to be that.
Yeah.
We all need to be people who are connecting the vision and connecting ministry to our lead pastor. For instance, every time we teach our staff here, every time we go out, and a big value here is ministry of presence. Pastor Steve talks about that. And to be there in those moments at the hospital or a birth of the baby or whatever, in the times where they're grieving, to just be present. But as you know, as the church gets larger, Pastor Steve can't be everywhere, right? And so as staff members, as people in the church, I always say to our team, whenever we go, one of the first things we say is, hey, just want you to know Pastor Steve and Cheryl send their greetings, and they're praying for you. We're connecting them to our lead pastor and his heart and his vision, right? It's not, and when we're insecure in who we are, it's easy to get off on the sideline and say, I'd like to get a little bit of, no, it's not about that. It's about aligning ourselves with the lead pastor's vision. That brings unity, it brings strength, and it'll bring blessing into your department and your ministry when you position your lead pastor correctly. And to be on the lookout for things that just even sniff of, that isn't in alignment with our vision.
Yeah.
That isn't in alignment with the house. So I don't just let that go. I've got to take initiative. Let's have a conversation. Hey, you said that. That doesn't really line up with what Pastor Steve is calling us to do. So how can we get from there to here? Let's work on this together, right? So we're always trying to make that connection. Always trying to put our lead pastor in the right light. Yeah. Like we have a multiple campus over in West Seattle. West Seattle's different than Issaquah, right? But in West Seattle, we want to always position, because Pastor Steve can't be there in person all the time, but we definitely want to position him well and the vision well at that house as well. So we're talking about this. So always making those connections.
Yeah. And on that note, I think this is important to hit. We're living in a day and age where there's a reaction to some of unhealthy church leadership that's gone on the last few years. And one of the words you hear a lot is this reaction to honor culture. Mm-hmm. Have you guys heard that term before? And really that term honor culture is synonymous with a type of church abuse. And what it is honor culture is the kind of church culture where everyone in the church is a yes man to the senior pastor. Where no matter what the senior pastor says, whether it's good, bad, ugly, ethical, unethical, our job is just to say yes to the senior pastor. Mm-hmm. And there's been a reaction to that now where, where everyone is anti-honor culture. So here's what I would encourage you to grab a hold of. The Bible's clear about honoring authority. So let's just be clear that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There have been people that have abused a sense of being a yes man to a leader blindly. A healthy church has a leader that you can trust, that you want to say yes to as much as you can, but there's also transparency, there's integrity, there's character, there's accountability. And so here's what I would encourage you with. You want to posture yourself in a place where you can say yes to your senior pastor as much as possible. Mm-hmm. In fact, you want that to be the answer that's on the tip of your tongue. We joke around all the time. Pastor Steve will say things to us in staff meeting, and he'll say, can we do this? And inside I'm going, heck no. There's no way, right? There's no chance we can do this. But you know what? The answer is always on the tip of the tongue. Pastor, I don't know how, but we're committed to help figure it out. We'll figure it out. If that's in your heart, you want that to happen, we will figure out how to make that happen. Yeah. Now, obviously, if you're in a situation where there's things that are corrupt or unethical or whatever, you should have a conversation about that. Mm-hmm. However, we should absolutely honor our leaders. We should honor them. We should look for every chance we can to say yes to what they're wanting to do. And this goes to our last thought before we go to Q&A, which is sometimes there's a lack of communication. And one of those areas where there can be a lack of communication is not just from the top down, but from you outward, where there is a faulty sense of communication of your loyalty and even your ability to defend and communicate the vision to the people around you. One of the most detrimental things that can happen is when you become a listening ear to people's gripes, complaints, gossip, and ways that they want to talk negatively about things they're seeing in the church. When you answer things like, I know, man, whoo, yeah, I'm with you, or I understand. When someone has a complaint about the vision, the direction, or even has a complaint about your leader, our first reaction should always be a place of defense and a place of resolution. So what I would encourage you with is someone ever comes to you and is like, man, Pastor Larry, I can't believe that Pastor Steve would, cut funding for our area of ministry. Does he not understand that, our puppet ministry is reaching 3 kids a year for Jesus? You ever have people that just want to complain about change, or they want to complain about the vision of the church, or whatever. And here's how you need to reframe these conversations as a communicator of the vision, is to say, hey, listen, there's some things about this conversation, I don't know all the details, but here's what I do know. You can trust Pastor Steve's heart. You can trust the decisions he's making that are going to be best for the church. And if there's an issue that you need more clarity on, I would love to go have a conversation with you with Pastor Steve, and so we can resolve this for you. Have you talked to Pastor Steve about this yet? And they go, well, no, I have. Okay, well, great. Well, I'm so glad you came and talked to me so that we can have a moment where we can go talk about this and resolve this together. You just want to make sure you don't ever create room for the enemy to be able to use your relationship with people like a petri dish for the wrong things to fester and grow. And so just make sure you're a defender of the vision of the house and a defender of your lead pastor everywhere you go.
Yes. Man, that was golden right there. If you're writing anything down, right, what he just said down, that was golden. Where are we at? Lack of communication?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think one of the things that we had talked about even around this was the reality that vision leaks,
yes.
right? And so we got to be people that everywhere we go, we are broadcasting the vision.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've sat in on Pastor Billy's children's ministries meetings. And he's constantly saying, hey, what Pastor Steve is challenging us to do. So what's shared in the staff meeting then just goes out and gets broadcasted in all the departments. It's just consistent. Here's where we're going. This is the vision. This is why we're doing what we're doing. It just continues to happen. That's why I say it's a team sport.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know the vision, aren't clear on the vision, don't feel like you're connected to the vision, that's on you. You got to take responsibility, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You got to take ownership and say, you know what, I need to hear the heart. If I'm going to represent the heart of my pastor, I need to hear his heart. I need to know his heart. I need to know what's concerning him. And sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes it's tough when you're sitting in the number 1 seat. I mean, before I got in the number 1 seat, I was thinking, man, I would do it this way. I'd do it that way. And then I became number 1. I called all my former lead pastors and said, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
You don't know the pressure and you don't know the responsibility. You can try to explain it, but you can't explain it. You can only experience it. And when you experience it, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And so I all of a sudden saw things from a different perspective, because the reality is usually we have a department or we have an area and it's our baby, we're thinking that. And we're trying to make a connection to the big picture. When you're lead, you're seeing it all. And you're thinking of how everything impacts everything else. Yeah. And so get close to your lead pastor, know what their heart is, and realize, now what I say, you just don't even know. You don't even know. So you got to trust your leader.
Yeah.
Trust your leader. Pastor Steve says it all the time. We even say it in our membership classes. We don't always have all the information why decisions are being made a certain way. And so we'll have a small window into it and think, wow, why are they making a decision like that? Always have your meter default set on trusting your leaders.
Yeah.
That they have information maybe that you don't have, and so they're making a decision in the best interest of the overall church. That's another phrase around here, church first, right? In that what's best for the overall church. And it may not be what's best for my department at the moment, but the vision for the overall church. And as that level rises, my department, my ministry will rise as well, okay? And so it's just making sure that we know that, the heart of our lead, and carrying that out and broadcasting it in whatever ways. Even out in the atriums, or if you don't have an atrium, that's just a fancy word for foyer or lobby or whatever. In conversations, we're all carriers of that vision.
Yeah.
And we need to stay connected and communicate it in an effective way. So
yeah, that's great. That church first mantra has been huge for our team. Because what that means is we're not here to make our departments win, we're here to make the church win.
Yeah.
And there are going to be times where that means my department has to make a sacrifice. But if it's for the health of the church, guess what? Ultimately, you may make a temporary sacrifice for your department, but if the church wins, you win.
Yeah.
But if the church loses and your department wins, you still lose. So it's important to see that when the church wins, when you got to make sacrifices in your area, that's okay. Because all boats will rise when the church wins. So we got a couple minutes for Q&A. I'm sure that there's some stuff contextually within your unique situations. You're going, okay, yeah, that's nice, I get it, but how does this actually work? So if you got any questions, fire away.
What was the best conversation you had with your dad establishing those boundary lines and communication things? And did you ever use his grandkids as collateral?
Did I ever use the grandkids as collateral? Absolutely.
Yes.
Pastor Steve just walked in right now.
Just walked in the door.
So this is a great time for me to answer this question because... Yes. Are we recording this? Did we get that? Perfect. Thanks, Jared. You heard from Pastor Steve in the first session about his upbringing, commercial fishing. And so when I got hired here at the church, literally day one, I was in the office doing, the fun onboarding stuff, like learning how to do payroll and filling out paperwork. And he walked in and said, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch?" And I was like, "Nothing." He's like, "All right, come with me." And so we went out to lunch and had a great conversation. But, he worked for his dad on the boat. And one of the things that he would, always talk about is how my grandpa would tell him, like, "Hey, here's the reality. There's not going to be a day on this boat where any of the other crew think you're on this boat because you're my son. They're going to know you're on this boat because you earned your way here and that you've proved yourself as a worthy sailor. So here's the deal. You're going to have to work harder than everybody else. And I'm going to give you all the jobs that are the worst, nastiest, most difficult, most dangerous jobs because I don't want anyone to think there's any sort of favoritism around here." And he said, "So I just want you to know, Josh, as my son, that there's not going to be a day here at Eastridge where anybody thinks that you're here just because you share the same last name with me. And what that means is you're going to have to work harder than everybody else. And I'm going to ask you to do things that I'm not going to ask other people to do." And so you could imagine how encouraging that conversation was on day one. I was like, oh, great. But to be honest, when it comes to how we've learned to communicate with each other, it's been a song and dance for 16 years. And there have been some moments where I got pulled into his office and he said, "Hey, listen, I understand what you're trying to say, but you can't talk to me like that in front of the team. And I need you to understand why." And there have been some moments where I had to own it and I had to apologize. And I had to even apologize to other people who were in the room. And then there have been some other times where it went the other way. And thank God for my mom. It died, yeah. Where thank God for my mom. My mom stepped in and is like, "Steve, you hurt Josh's feelings today, and you need to go apologize to him." And so we've just had to learn. I've had to learn what are the wrong moments and what are the hot buttons. It's a lot like love languages. I got to learn how to communicate in a way that he can receive, and I think vice versa. But to be honest, the onus is more on me because I'm on the team, so I got to learn to adapt to him. So that's what I would say.
It's been fun watching.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Yeah, right over here.
Yes.
I have a question adapting this to secular life because it's a leadership principle is to follow your leaders, be a good follower. So does leadership want to know when there's a discourager? And if so, how on earth would you navigate that if the discourager is actually a threat?
So
for example, somebody is being pessimistic and a downer
Mm-hmm.
in the lobby and for you guys, and for maybe in the office or after work.
Yeah.
Does your leadership generally want? I assume they kind of already know who the Debbie Downers same time, do they need us to help support them by letting them know, like, I've actually seen this person in action, maybe down there?
Oh yeah, we need to correctly. That's why we said earlier, you got to really know your leader's heart and know where they're going, so that when you sniff anything negative out, you don't just let it slide. Pastor Steve says, sow daily to the unity of the church here. Every day we have to fight for that. Every day we're doing that. So anything that sniffs of disunity or down or anti-vision, we just take it on ourselves to come alongside and say, hey, I hear you saying that. I don't know everything that's going on in your life right now, but I can tell you this. This is Pastor Steve's heart, or this is the leader's heart. I know. And that isn't lining up with the Pastor Steve that I know.
Even if it's like a good friend.
Right.
So,
you got to be a good friend to.
Yeah. One of the things that we say all the time, and this is what Pastor Steve has asked of us, is to be problem solvers at the lowest level possible. And so what that means is, I don't want to have to take it up. If I can deal with it here, let's deal with it here. And that's a gift to your leader. If you're in the business world and you got a coworker who's being disruptive or who is being detrimental to the culture, I would say, and I'm not at your work, but I know here in our organization we have the permission and the responsibility to solve this issue here. Yeah. And if it doesn't get resolved here, then I got to take it up. But if there's a situation here, you should feel the freedom to be able to say, hey, I know, and here's how you have this conversation. It's not accusatory. It's not in a place where like, hey, you're doing this wrong. I always start with, your motive is not to be this way. So, hey, I don't know, I know this is probably not your heart, but the way that you're doing this or the way you're saying this is coming across like this. And you may not even realize it, but it's impacting the people around you negatively. And so, and if that's the case and they don't react to it and they don't respond appropriately to it and you've tried to deal with it here, then you take it up a rung. Yeah, for sure.
Good. I think we're past our time. Shocking.
I know.
So any more questions? Pastor Josh will be available afterwards.
Absolutely.